5+ years? I don't know.
Feels longer than that. We put
Long.
2 years in the pandemic,
Oh,
so
well, yeah, actually, I've been at Zendesk for 4 years, so 7 or 8 years now.
yeah,
Time is, I don't know.
long
We're in
time.
time
So
where we're,
I
yeah.
am very happy to introduce our friend Julie, and I'm looking forward to what you have to share with us.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. My name is Julie Kim. I'm the Senior Director of Engineering Practice and Enablement and the Chief of Staff to the Head of Engineering, Pat Copeland at Zendesk. Thank you so much, Alina Volker, and the rest of the Bay Area Agile Leadership Network planning team for having me. I am thrilled, even though it's 73 degrees and I'm a weather wimp, I'm still thrilled to be here to share some of the things that I've been thinking about around what excellence looks like. I know that this is a Zoom presentation, but if you feel comfortable, I'd love if you can turn your video on because it energizes me to see your faces and see you laugh at my jokes and just feel more engaged by seeing your face. At some other time, I might be invited back to talk a little bit about professional branding, and I will, in that particular talk about why seeing each other face to face and even in-person interactions is so important for personal connections. But it's important, it helps me as a speaker. So if you feel comfortable, I'd love that. I have about an hour together with you, and I'll ask that you'll save any questions for the end. But I have been sort of out of the Agile coaching practice for a couple of years now. But in my role at Zendesk as Engineering Practices Enablement and Chief of Staff, I have a 20-person global team dedicated to really enabling the best work of Zendesk engineers. We work on engineering onboarding, manager enablement, all the university programs like interns and co-ops, all our engineering events like Tech Summit, Grace Hopper, Table for Six, Shashir, shout out to my buddy at Zendesk, knows what I'm talking about. All our budgets, our headcount, contractors, recruiting practices, digital first, learning outcomes, documentation, organizational programs. I wrote it all down because our team does it all. And I'm so ridiculously proud of that team. And we're always striving for excellence, which brings me to today's topic, the cost of excellence. So welcome, friends. This is a talk about excellence and the cost of excellence. We all want high-performing teams, highly productive employees, but excellence comes at a sneaky cost, and we don't always talk about that. So I want to share with you a little bit about some observations, successes, failures, and learnings from pursuing excellence almost my entire life. And this is what I mean by that. I'll share you a little bit about myself. I'm the mom of two girls, 12 and 9, who are just outside that door. I work in their bedroom. I've been at Zendesk for 4 years. Again, really proud of my extended team of 20 who have been working, I've been working together with. I'm a Berkeley grad. My husband is a Star Wars fan, which means I'm a Star Wars fan. And I have this personality trait, best described by my Strength Finders test, which I encourage all of you to consider taking. I came out super strong with maximizer, and I never heard about that quality before. But when I read the first line of the maximizer quality, I was like, oh my gosh, these people know me. And I'll just read it out loud here. It says, excellence, not your average, not average, is your measure. Okay, taking something from below average to slightly above average takes a huge amount of effort. And in your opinion, it's not very rewarding. But transforming something that is strong into something superb takes just as much effort and is much more thrilling. That is the story of my life. And when I read this, I was like, I can't believe it. These people know me. And it's taken me a while to kind of like put this talk together, but I just wanted to show you a little bit of context of like why that's so relevant to me is because this idea of excellence has like permeated the way that I think and the way that I think about work. I will fully admit I have an obsessive and addictive personality that pursues excellence. And I want to share some of those stories about what I learned about in that pursuit. So first up, I want to tell you a little story about ribs. So about 10 years ago, I bought a condo and I was thrilled to be a first-time homeowner, but the condo did not come with any outdoor space. like not even a deck. Like we just had windows. There was no outdoor space. And I wanted to learn, I was like excited to learn how to make ribs on the grill. But since we didn't have a grill, I was like, what do I do? I looked up what everybody does. I look on Google, find an oven recipe for my family. And it was a huge hit. Like I made it again and again and again and again, and each time tweaking a part of the recipe to make it better. And soon it became my signature dish. Like people would request it. Like I'd be like, you want to come over for dinner? They're like, you making ribs? And I'm like, I guess I am now. Like, okay. Um, and over the course of the 7 years that I lived in that condo, I kind of became hyper focused and almost obsessed on how to make these the best oven ribs recipe ever. I tried different meats and sauces and cuts and temperature settings, durations, trays, different rubs. And I must have made this recipe like at least 50 plus times. Like at one time I feel like I was making it like every weekend, but a ridiculous number of times. I have now been granted Julie's Famous Ribs hashtag as a result. And these are so good. My husband's cousin offered to invest in my restaurant because he loved these so much if I decided to go for it, which I might take him up on that offer. And if you're also interested, you can pick me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to give away the recipe as long as you credit me when your friends compliment you on them. But this is what I mean by my hyper focus on excellence and pushing myself to be the best. I also won the most number of awards at my high school graduation. I got accepted to every undergraduate and graduate program I applied to. I've won every scholarship that I've ever applied to. But there is a serious cost to this kind of ridiculous pursuit of excellence. Like I'm an insomniac. Like my brain does not shut off. And I've been struggling with mental health for most of my life. I've actually been admitted to John George Psychiatric Ward down in Oakland for mental health, for suicide attempts, and for depression, dealing with lots of OCD tendencies. And while I'm an example of like an extreme version of like pursuit of excellence, I just want to share that there's a lot of things that I've learned about that I want to share with you. And this talk is a really deeply personal one. So I want to share with you what I'm learning about myself, what I'm continuing to learn about cost, and how we as leaders can help our teams and our peers thrive. So this is the agenda for us today. Let's get started. My talk is split into 4 parts. What is excellence? Some themes on excellence. What is the cost related to that? And what can leaders do to help our teams? So what is excellence? It's a little bit subjective, huh? Right? Like who gets to define what excellence is? So let's start with my favorite way of thinking about words, which is going back to the definitions and the roots of words to help us get the understanding of what these mean. So excellence, thank you, dictionary.com, is the quality of being outstanding or extremely good. Not very helpful. Or the mark of superiority in that which something or someone excels. And I was like, that's only partially helpful, right? So, what it's trying to say is that someone somewhere out there is setting the standard for good enough, and excellence means doing better than that. Like whatever that whatever the bar is, excellence is better than that, right? So the questions we can ask ourselves is, who is setting the standard and what is good enough, right? Like let's start there. So 3 questions that I always ask myself, my stakeholders, and my teams. And Shashir, who has worked with me before, knows I am obsessively asking these questions over and over again. Are what's the problem we're trying to solve? How do we know it's a problem, and who said it was a problem? Like there's a lot of opinions. And what does success look like? And this last question is really important so you can define whether or not you're achieving the good enough version or the excellence version, right? Like when you ask someone, what does success look like for you? You can gauge, are they looking for, I want this and more, or are they saying, I just want the bare minimum? Making sure that you get that answer from the person who defines what success looks like is super important. That last question always gets us. So how can we define excellence once we're sort of thinking about like now we know what we're kind of shooting for? Sometimes the problem I want to solve when I'm asking those 3 questions doesn't really have a clear end, which brings me to how I define excellence. And I think there's kind of two groups. One is where excellence is really well defined, has a clear outcome, and another bucket is kind of like, I'll kind of know when I get there. And so some of these well-defined outcomes and excellence measures are OKRs, SMART goals, top priority programs. There's a specific milestone or outcome that you're trying to reach, right? Like there's a certain level expectation of a metric to reach. And the others are kind of like, nah, I'll kind of figure it out. And it's really important, especially when you're working together with stakeholders, product owners, folks who are defining requirements. um, which measure are we using when it looks at excellence? And I'll give you an example from my own life. So early on in my career journey, I was a high school chemistry teacher. I taught freshman science all the way up through AP chemistry at Castro Valley High School. And folks would ask me, where do you see yourself in like 5 to 10 years? And I would have looked them straight in the eye and I would have told them, I want to win the presidential award for the best teacher of the year. I would have been like, that 100%, that is my goal. Like, also, I want to love on students and make sure they become good science citizens and like make sure that they like pass high school, all that good stuff. But I personally I will win the presidential award for the best teacher of the year. I attended one of the best educational master's programs at UC Berkeley. I won several teaching fellowships at the Exploratorium, the Bay Area Tech Museum, the prestigious Knowles Science Teaching Fellowship. I had a wait list of students who wanted to transfer into my chemistry class. And I had a very specific goal of what excellence meant for me then. But several years, okay, maybe decades later, I'm now working in tech. And as I described earlier, the kind of programs that I'm working on, people will ask me the same question, like, where do you see yourself in 5 to 10 years? Like, what do you want to do? What does excellence look like for you now? Like now that you're not teaching anymore? And my answer is kind of in the second bucket. I'm like, I kind of will know when I get there, right? Like, I'm making an impact. I'm proud of the leaders that I've grown and that I've invested into. I've put enough energy into initiatives that matter. Like, I don't know. I don't really know what the milestone is, but I know it. I'll know it when I get there. Like, well, I'll know when I see it. And as a manager and leader, if you have an expectation of excellence, it's really useful and helpful to define which version of excellence you're requesting or expecting of your teams, right? Do you have a very specific outcome or milestone that you're expecting folks to meet or exceed, like a certain number of stories or epics or this number of backlog items? Or are you going to be providing feedback until you feel like you've reached a level of excellence or good enough or beyond that? Articulating this out loud is really useful for folks when you're the one that's setting the standard for good enough and for excellence. So I want to share some themes of excellence and what I've observed in my own life. What have I learned? The first one is ridiculous prioritization. This is no surprise for anybody in agile practice. I know for a fact I cannot have multiple hobbies at the same time. Like I just can't. I have to be very selective about the things I want to like invest my time into because I'm so hyper focused with a single hobby. I have to be selective about which interests I have. But the story that I want to tell you here is about one of my really good friends and her daughter Noelle about ridiculous prioritization. One of my dear friends, Makiko Nakajima, has 3 children, all of who are musical prodigies. The older daughter, she's 16, plays piano. She's won multiple international competitions, played on NPR, at the Carnegie Hall in New York. Her second child, Noah, plays both piano and violin, but his current instrument is the harp. And her third child, Noelle, who's now 9, plays violin. Noelle is likely the most gifted of the 3 of them and is now pursuing admittance to Juilliard School of Music in New York, where he also takes master classes. I want to play for you a video from 2019 when Noelle was only 6 years old. 6 years old. And we can go on and listen to that amazing talent for a long time. And I will happy to send you this YouTube video you can watch. But I want to share this example of Noelle and the commitment from my friend Makiko on ridiculous prioritization. Noelle has been homeschooled since has been in first grade. She plays at least 4 hours a day. She spends all of her weekends at conservatory in SF. She has two international instructors, which alternate throughout the year. And my friend Makiko, as her mom, has lived her entire life as a chauffeur. Like 100%, she will admit, I am the taxi driver for all of my kids' lessons. It's an incredible investment of time and money toward musical lessons and performances. She taught herself to be a teacher, like to be the homeschool teacher for two of her students. And she researches, manages, and flies with her children for camps and concerts and lessons literally all over the world. And so you would say that this family has prioritized a pursuit of professional music in their life. And so what is the cost for them, right? Most other things have become deprioritized. And it's so important. I'm going to say it 3 times. Most other things have become deprioritized. Birthday parties, play dates, public school, like pretty much any other hobby, budget for vacations, additional expenses, all go into lessons and new violins. And so what's the learning for me? It's really to clarify what is the priority. If I'm going to go after this goal and deprioritize everything else, what is the goal? Like, let's be super clear on that. And better yet, a single prioritized list. We're always pushing for single backlog, no black book work, right? Make it super clear where our priorities fall. The next is also like a term that we use at Zendesk all the time, which is like managers really need to be the shit umbrella, right? Shield the politics, the thrash, and the drama so that the teams and the person can focus on in priority order. And related to that is taking care of the unprioritized work. When it comes to Makiko, she figures out all the scheduling. She makes sure Noelle has all of her snacks, appropriate concert time, violin, appropriate concert attire, violin repairs, travel arrangements. They're all taken care of so that all Noelle has to do is focus on her skill. And that's a thing that we need to do better as managers and leaders for our teams when they're pursuing excellence. What is all of that unprioritized work that just needs to happen that we can take care of, or we can pass off to another team so that the team that's pursuing some particular goal can focus in on that and spend all of their energy on that work. A funny story about prioritization is also to make sure that the criteria for prioritization is also clear. I was working on a team where the backlog was working toward a customer beta. Unfortunately, there was a mismatch in the definition of what beta meant. The product owner was working toward a very VIP limited access beta with like super fancy features just so that they can get buy-in and feedback. Whereas the team was working toward like a barely minimum viable product to test their production release. And there was this constant battle of like, why are we doing those feature work when we have to work on our production process? And it wasn't until we had this like aha moment of like, hold on, what does beta mean to you? Because this is what beta means to us. Like what we were prioritizing was different. And so making that super clear has been helpful. And I'll give you an example. This is also true when I eat marshmallows first, whereas my daughter will eat all the cereal first so that she can savor the marshmallows at the end. We have a different way of prioritizing our cereal consumption experience. I will deprioritize cereal and milk. I'm like, not important. If I can eat all the marshmallows. Whereas Ellie, she has to have cereal, milk, and marshmallows, but in that order, and she will deprioritize lunch. So like being super clear about what we're prioritizing and how we're prioritizing with that framework is really important. Okay, next up, narrow focus. Oops. One of my favorite burger chains, hopefully if you're on the West Coast, you would also agree with me, is the best burger ever, is at In-N-Out. And In-N-Out, as you know, has an incredibly small menu. Basically what you see on the screen here. They do not have a multi-page menu. They stick to what they're good at, and their menu has never changed. They basically only make burgers, fries, and shakes. That's it. They have a secret menu. You can combine all the things to make other things, but they basically make burgers, fries, and shakes. And In addition to having a small menu, they are incredibly limited in where they will open a new franchise. Stores need to be within 500 miles of their produce and meat supplier so that all their meat is fresh and never frozen. In order to maintain consistency and quality across every single location, they have prioritized that aspect of their business over having a range of other options. And so they could likely have a multi-page menu or build a chain across the country or even internationally, but they wouldn't be able to guarantee the freshness and quality which they have prioritized as part of their business brand. And they're narrow focused on doing a few good things and maybe a single good thing, great burgers, because their fries are sometimes their taste like sawdust, but that's a different story, has helped grant their title one of the best burger joints on the West Coast. And so what does that mean for us, right? Yeah, here we go. What we can lean is there is a cost of focus, like a serious cost of focus. Focus can often feel like we are the only one. We are the only team solving this problem. We are the only leader who cares. And what can you do? I want to encourage you as leaders and managers to be a good follower. If you've seen Lessons from the Dancing Guy, um, being the first follower is actually a really underappreciated form of leadership, right? Like bolstering someone else, bolstering a team who is feeling really lonely because of their focus can be incredibly empowering. When I was first starting my own meetup, I had to do it after hours, and I felt super lonely to work out the details all by myself. And it was hard because I was like I was eating into my family time. But I remember a really pivotal moment where my husband, who's my biggest supporter, came to me and he said, "Don't worry about the kids. I will take care of them at night. I will feed them. I will make sure that they do homework. I will put them to sleep. And on any of the nights that I needed to be out." And he just said, "Go pursue it. I will take care of it for you. Like, I will do all of that so you can prioritize that at this stage of your life." And that was just hugely beneficial for me when I was feeling so lonely to have a cheerleader who was supporting me through that work. He was like, "Your work is important, and I'm here to support you." The next step is the amount of lost opportunities, right? There may be some opportunities that you're purposely choosing not to pursue because of your focus. In and Out could invest in more stores, but they purposely choose not to. Noelle hasn't been able to attend a ton of events, birthday parties, because of her concert and lesson schedule. But these are the trade-offs that are required and are kind of done with transparency. So as a leader, I encourage you to frequently review your return on investment and revisit what you're losing, what you're deprioritizing, and make sure that you're still making the right decisions and the right prioritizations. And lastly is a little bit of fear of failure. When you have such a hyper focus on excellence, you feel like there's a giant pressure to succeed. Like if your job is just to do this one thing and be excellent at this one thing, there is an incredible pressure of fear of failure. Um, 2 years ago, my manager, the head of engineering, asked me to lead the digital first efforts across product development. And this is right when we were entering COVID. And he was looking into the future about thinking what the future of work was going to look like. And he wanted me to think about how I can apply good best practices to our organization to get prepared for when we're all working remotely. And I was so honored about this, but I was in a constant state of worry, so much anxiety about making the wrong decisions for our product development organization. But the most important thing that my manager did for me at that time was he promised to partner with me along the way. And that reduced my fear of failure and allowed me to have good conversations, like kind of honestly, about what our focus should actually be. Like I could push aside all of the politics of like, what do I think should happen versus what is happening now and sort of the recommendations based on my research. And lastly, I want to encourage you to check in on the mental and physical health of your teams. Get clued in to burnout that comes with focused intensity. Encourage breaks and recharge moments. This is especially true if you have like a team that's working toward a particular deadline or a milestone or have committed to like high intensity work toward a goal, um, yes, we want that high performing effort from our teams, but as managers, it is our job to keep an eye on the mental health of our teams to make sure that that is sustainable. And so if you know a little bit about my story, which I shared about earlier, I have struggled with anxiety and depression for most of my adult life. And having self-imposed focus, or sometimes externally requested focus, often means that I don't take good care of myself. And so my health deteriorates. I am so grateful to managers and peers who remind me to take care of my physical, spiritual, mental well-being first. They tell me to take water breaks. At one of my first jobs, I had a friend who would pick me up in the morning and drop me off at home. And part of the reason was she's like, if I just leave you at work, Julie, you will never come home. So I am going to pick you up in the morning and I'm going to drop you off at home because you have no other way of getting home. And I am so eternally grateful for those kind of people who have checked in on my mental health. And so I tell my teams frequently, self-care is a form of career discipline. Like that has to be built into the way that people think about their careers. So next up is the investment of time. Quantity over quality is something that we focus in the very beginning, but um, so oftentimes we think about quality over quantity, but I want to argue that quantity over quality is incredibly important in the very beginning. So if you know me outside of work, I am a succulent enthusiast. I don't know if that's the right word. Like Madison has come seen my garden before. This is a hobby that I picked up during the pandemic, and it started with keeping one succulent alive that came with my new house. And I was about to throw it out. And my mom was like, why don't you try to keep this succulent alive? And I was like, Mom, don't you know I have a black thumb? Like I kill everything. And she was like, you have a ton of time. We're in the middle of a pandemic. You should try to keep this one succulent alive. And I was like, okay. And that triggered like this obsessive tendency to figure out how to keep all succulents alive. But the point that I want to make here, oh, this is now my therapy, full-blown obsession. Like I'm unapologetic about it. I have close to 700, 1,000 unique varieties. Like I am like selling and trading with international growers. Like it's a whole thing, right? But it's this idea that I have spent so much time in my garden, almost forcibly because of the pandemic, right? Malcolm Gladwell, he popularized this idea that spending 10,000 hours on a skill increases your chance to becoming an expert in that field. And what I know about my succulent garden is that due to the pandemic and due to lockdown, like we are not allowed to go anywhere. I have spent a ridiculous number of hours in my garden tending to my plants. And so much so that we've invented a new term in my household. It's called succulenting. It's a verb for gardening. Like, Mom, are you succulenting now? And I'm like, yep, see you soon. And I would wake up early before everyone else. I would go clean the bugs, pull off dead leaves, repot outsized plants, and by midday I would go outside to tend to my garden during lunch, and after dinner in the dark by flashlight trim and prune and water my plants. But all of this is to say that this hobby would not have been possible without the number of hours that I've invested, it largely due to the pandemic forcing me to. And so what I want to talk about excellence is the investment of time that's needed to making sure that teams, that individuals can pursue excellence. And another way of thinking about that is through the lens of a reaction. And my background is as a chemist, so I can't give up the opportunity to throw in a scientific example. But in an exothermic reaction, or a reaction that produces energy, you need to apply a specific level of activation energy or investment. And that takes time. And that's tracked in this graph along the bottom as reaction time. On the bottom of this graph. But during this window, when the activation energy is being applied, the reaction progress, the time is actually elapsing, but it feels like nothing is happening. And quite frankly, it's a lot of work. But without this activation energy, the reaction would not proceed and we would not get to lower potential energy overall, so likely in the form of heat or light. And so think of it as lighting a match to kindling to get it to burn, right? It takes time and investment of energy in order for that to finally catch. and you get the outcome, which is the fire. So what's the lesson here? Like, oftentimes activation energy seems like a loss of time, right? We interpret it as a loss because nothing is happening, right? We think we put in energy, we should get something out. But during that window where you need investment of time, you're putting in energy, but you're not getting anything out. But it's in order to reframe that, that time investment is actually required and necessary. It's actually necessary to get the outcome. Um, that time required to reach that level of excellence requires patience during the reaction process, lots of cheerleading, and big investments. The next one I want to talk about, and speaking of investments, excellence also requires good tooling. A carpenter is only as good as its tools. I want to tell you a story about my really good friend, Antoinette, who lives in New Mexico. She was here in the Bay Area while her husband got his PhD at Berkeley, and she decided that she wanted to go after her lifelong dream of opening a bakery from scratch. She did it from scratch, where she can make custom cakes. She owns an online shop where you can order custom cakes for your party or celebration. But like, look at these cakes. Isn't it incredible? Like, I can stare at these cakes, and this is only a sampling from her website, but just like unbelievable, right? Um, and recently she got a big burst in her business. And I asked her, like, Antoinette, where did your biggest lift come from? And I was so surprised at her answer. I honestly thought that she was going to say something like, oh, I took a class. I did better marketing, getting on social media, or investing in a new market. But she pointed right to her tools. She said to me, I started renting a commercial kitchen and I got a bigger fridge. I got a bigger fridge. And I was like, what? Bigger fridge means I can make bigger cakes. Bigger cakes mean more options, and more options mean more business. And I was like, oh, that's the thing? She's like, I got a bigger fridge, which means I can make more bigger cakes. And so the upgrade in her tools is what contributed to her ability to build more excellence into her work. So having the right tools, having the right access to tools, and the right integration of tools in the process can hugely aid in a process where folks can be excellent, right? This is part of getting rid of all of the things, automating all the things that is kind of like busy work in order for them to focus in on the most important thing. So what does that investment look like? There's sort of two categories, right? There's the tangible and intangible. There's budget. Like sometimes they need to travel to a different country to meet with another person so they can have synergy, and like they can't do that without budget. They need more headcount on teams, access to tools. Sometimes it's physicals or software. Also donuts, hugely valuable for a tangible investment to make sure that teams are high performing. But there's also like a lot of intangible. Permission of time, we talked about in the previous one, giving them space, feedback, words of appreciation, networking and introductions. And one that I didn't put on here was permission not to do their day job. At Zendesk, right at the beginning of the pandemic, we were having customers who had like high profile customers who were having specific issues with regard to load and reliability because they suddenly had a large scope in tickets based on their particular market and how the COVID was impacting them. And so we got a tag team together, a Tiger team, and we said, we give you permission not to do your day job. We will somehow backfill and deprioritize that work. And you, Tiger team, is going to focus on solving this customer problem. We gave them the intangible investment of not doing their day job so they can focus in on this. If you have others, I'd love to hear about it, both in the chat or afterwards as well. And the last one that I want to talk about here is that excellence necessitates waste. And this is a big pill to swallow as leaders and managers. So what do I mean by waste? In the past, one of my hobbies included running a party planning service, and I had an Etsy store making custom party planning supplies. All the decorations you see here in this photo were handmade by me, and I specialized in paper crafts. But the thing with paper crafts is that once you cut something out of paper, you're left with scraps. It's not like dough where you can like put it back together and make decorations on the edge of your pie filling. Like once you cut out of paper, You can't reuse that piece over again. I mean, you can like save the scraps and try to like reuse that, but most of those times, most of the times in making these crafts, those scraps, no matter how large they were or how expensive the paper I cut them from, goes right into the trash or recycling. I can't reuse it. And I used to try to keep those scraps and like expect myself to use the scraps again. I would like, I'm gonna like catalog these by color and shapes and size. I never went back to it, right? Because I'm optimizing for my customer outcome. Um, I was trying to like fulfill orders all the time, and I couldn't optimize for using like operations, which is a not excellence, right? Operations is like figuring how to get the most out of what you have, right? That's a whole different kind of prioritization, which is not excellence. So don't confuse the two. But like in the end, I just accepted that scraps are part of the process. And many times the thing that I was making was brand new, right? A name banner, a photo wrap for water bottles, donut picks. Like it's like I was inventing from scratch, like figuring out what is the best thing for this customer. And I had to just accept the fact that I had scraps. Um, the note here that I have in my notes is I tried to not conflate excellence with process optimization, right? Process optimization, again, is getting the most out of what you have or as little as, shrinking that out. Excellence is something else. Excellence is you're pursuing the best that you can possibly be. And in that process, you have to necessitate waste. I was focused on speed to delivery, and that included tons and tons of recycled paper waste. I want to tell you another story about. I was recently up in Seattle during spring break, and I attended the True Glass Museum and Garden. I don't know if any of you've been there. It is incredible, and I highly recommend that you attend this glass museum. So Dave Chuhilli is an American glass blowing artist and specializes in large public art glass exhibits all over the world: Singapore, Venice, all over the US, Finland, Jerusalem, just to name a few. And I was completely blown away, not just by the artistry of this museum, but just the scale and the size of these art pieces. There was a little theater to sit down and watch some documentaries, and I was super tired, so I just sat down and I was just like mindlessly listening to some of these documentaries, but it was mind blowing. I learned so much, and I was completely blown away. Um, so Dave Trujillo, later on in life, he actually lost sight in one of his eyes, and he was no longer able to do the pieces himself. You can imagine if you've seen, like Netflix shows like Blown Away, like how intensely close you are to the fire and how close, like accurate you need to be with your glass blowing work. So what he would do is he would partner with local glassmaking factories and hire the entire crew. These like hundreds of people, hire the entire crew to make these elaborate chandeliers and public art displays. And he said a quote which caught me off guard, and I'll paraphrase here because I'm remembering this from the documentary. But he said, I don't even start to critique their work until after 20 to 30 pieces. I was like, what? That means the first 20 to 30 pieces from a team of professional glassmakers were considered practice and waste and like necessary waste to get to the pieces that he would use for his exhibitions. Like he would just go and they would crack it, reuse the glass and start over. I was like, what? Like all of that work to perfect one piece. And in the lower right corner, it's a picture that I took from the museum of the baskets exhibition. And it was a single piece of glass, colored in various ways that was being stretched to over 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 feet across. It's hard to see from these photos, the scale here. But in the documentary, they were showing the making of these exact glass pieces. And they were showing one, including several that crashed and broke in the process. Like you're stretching this like over time to 6, 7, 8, 9 feet. And when those crashed and broke, I felt heartbroken. I'm like, I have no investment. I have no emotional investment into this process. But I was like, I can't believe that thing broke. And the voiceover from Dave Trujillo was something like this. It said, I want to push the boundaries of glass thinness. Even if it means that my pieces will break, I don't want to do what everyone else has done. And I was so moved by that. He is pushing the boundaries of glass thinness, even if it means that things will break. And so Dave Chihuly was not afraid of the waste that was involved in order to excel in his field. And he knew that the cost of waste and accepted it as part of the process. And again, these pictures do not do justice to the incredible glass pieces that he's created and directed. And so what does that mean for us? Oh, here we go. So what can we do? We have to accept that there is going to be waste in the overall process if we are pursuing excellence. We celebrate the iterations that lead to new discoveries and also the ones that don't. Like that's part of the effort that we go toward in pursuing excellence. We encourage experimentation, even if it means it doesn't end up in a solution, right? All of those avenues is helping us get toward the goal and learning more. Um, uh, Help manage, or even better, clean up the waste quickly to make space for next iterations. One of the best things that my husband would do for me during that time when I was party crafting is he would clean up all the scraps and reline up all my scissors and reline up all my glue sticks and just clean up my space so that I had a clean, not only physical space, but like mental space to work on the next project, right? Like prepping the space so that the continued pursuit of excellence was unhindered. And I mentioned this before too, but not to mix the priorities of excellence and optimization, right? Sometimes we're asking both of our teams. We're saying, do the best, but don't waste anything in the process. That is really hard and really unfair to ask of our teams. And the last one is create opportunities for recycling or reuse of waste if possible. Maybe by that team, maybe by that person, maybe by a different team, a different person. I had a bag of paper scraps, and it turns out that my first grade teacher was doing a lesson on shapes, and she was like, "Do you know anywhere I can get like 100 triangles?" And I was like, "Hello, I have a bag of 500 triangles. Let me drop it off to you," right? But it wasn't something that I was looking for, but because I had sort of stored those triangle shapes, um, it was easily reusable if it's possible. Um, so yeah, and that sort of brings me to sort of the end of my talk here. Um, what are the other things that we need to consider when we think about the pursuit of excellence and what it means? I have a couple here that I've shared for me from my own experience in my own life and the lessons that we can glean from that and how we make that work for our teams. But again, as it pertains to your own situations and what it means as they pursue a particular OKR, particular milestone, particular cutoff point on the backlog, whatever that looks like, I hope that some of these things have been helpful to help articulate what excellence means for you and your teams. So that's it from me. I know we have a little bit of time at the end for Q&A. I'm happy to field some questions, and I'll keep this slide up. You can always connect with me on Twitter or LinkedIn, and if you want to follow along my pursuit of excellence in succulents, you can follow me on Insta.
Thank you so much, Joy. And maybe just to kick us off, if you think about sort of in so loosely the context of Zendesk and your work, how many of your projects are in pursuit of excellence versus optimization?
Yeah, that is a great question. I would say almost 2/3 of our team, and we have about 2,000 person team, product development, and I'm spitballing here, but I'd say about 2/3 of our team is on process optimization. It is all of the maintenance work, so we have, foundation teams, we have optimization teams, we have a whole set of teams that only build for other Zendesk engineers. They are, building excellence in their own right, but in the categories that we're talking about here, I'd say less than a third when it comes to our product. We also have a fair number, not a lot at the same time, but a fair number of projects that require hyper focus to do a thing. And that feels like a category of pursuit of excellence. Um, I'll give you one example. We had to, like most companies, look at our spend, software spend, headcount spend, and that activity of like prioritizing our work, prioritizing our headcount, prioritizing a spend. We need to get under a certain amount of money, to get our budgets in order. That activity, I would say, classified under this like high intensity milestone. We have to get better. We have to get under this certain amount, but we're actually going to do better and do, go a million under that, right? Like we wanted to prove that engineering could really shine in this one area. That's this task that was requested of all the departments. And so, while that's not necessarily product related, it we have a fair number of those kinds of projects that sort of creep up into our roadmaps.
Thanks, Julie. While we're thinking about questions, I'll launch a quick poll. If you guys can just answer 2 simple questions, would be great for us to get an audience feedback. And whoever is next ready with the question, please, you can go. And I'll share the event feedback in a couple minutes. I'm just giving you more time to take it.
I've got a question.
Hi, Jacob. Yeah.
Hey, so, how do you manage the pace of excellence for longevity? Because I have seen in my own research of excellence and sometimes application, there's something inside of me that seems to rush me forward, but that same thing can crush me and destroy me. So I have to manage that and find peace amidst the excellent push. So I'm curious if you, it seems like you did succulent, that you found peace in that. If you found something in the workplace that is useful for that?
I'd say, I think what I'm hearing from you is like the motivation, like the sustainability and motivation. Am I interpreting your question right?
Yeah, I guess I'm bringing up something about excellence that I found in my own life is I have to be managing that drive inside because it can also bring me to a breaking point. And I'm curious if you've recognized that in the pursuit of excellence, that it can lead to some sort of breaking point, over striving point, or over anxious point. Have you recognized that?
Absolutely. That's actually why this talk exists, is because I have frequently gotten to my point where it is actually unhealthy, that pursuit of excellence. And when it comes to work, um, like I have a large global team, and I think that the thing that it's less about my own pursuit at work, since I'm mostly managing the employees on my team. I think the most important thing to consider, well, two most important things I'll share is I have to do a self check with my teams if I'm the one actually contributing to um, pushing them too hard. Like I have to do a self evaluation. When we do like a bandwidth evaluation, and or teams will vent to me, they're my hackers or individuals be like, I'm so overloaded. And I'm like, hold up. Am I contributing? Like, am I inadvertently expecting like the more than what is required because of my own pursuit of excellence? Or is it that we have collectively decided that there's an appropriate goal that's here? Like, I have to do a self evaluation if I'm like, since I know I can be pushing my teams quite hard in terms of what I expect of them, is what I am expecting too much or pushing them too hard when they can just deliver um, awesome work and it would still meet our stakeholders' expectations and goals and what they want to accomplish. But I'm like, no, no, no. The minimum bar for us, again, is not average. It's excellence. Like, am I raising the bars inadvertently? So there's that aspect. The other thing that I think is important for me when it comes to like managing my teams about that breaking point is I have to be hypersensitive to encourage them to take breaks. Um, I know that I have hired people like me who also have a high tendency for wanting excellence on our teams. And it's a quality that's incredibly valuable. And we've rolled out some amazing programs here at Zendesk. I also have to encourage them to take breaks.
Mm.
Um, I actually just got back from a 2-week PTO because I want to mirror and model um, actually taking breaks and recharging my brain. I have to be cautious when I see my team members starting to burn out because they're pushing themselves so hard. Like, I can do this, Julie. Like, I just want to get this done and I know that I can do it. And I'm like, hold on. When's the last time you took a break? Like, when's the last time you took like a long vacation or a long weekend? And it's something that I build into my team. We have quarterly evaluations. We like count the number of PTO days that they've taken that quarter because it's not something that's automatic for me. So I need that metric. I do it for myself and I do it for my teams because I want to make sure that while there's lots of other ways that I can make sure and manage their mental health, because we all want to do a good job, at least I do, and I want my teams to do a good job. I need an external metric at least to help me measure whether or not we're putting there's an adequate ratio to the amount of time that they're taking a break versus how much they're pushing into their work.
I have a similar question, which is, what you shared, by the way, was amazing. And I appreciate your vulnerability and being willing to share this because, like, we're all human and we're all dealing with our own stuff. And so, you know, uh, uh, about a year ago, I decided to um, leave a job after I struggled to try to find balance in my life. And I don't blame that company, I blame myself. I had put myself in a position where I had put in so many hours in pursuit of excellence and made myself relied upon by many people. And, and I was in a pickle. I could not get out of that position, even though I tried to for about a year. And so, and after failing to get out of that position for a year, I decided to finally quit, which was super scary because it was a fantastic job at a fantastic company. But I was dying, like I was like super burnt out. And so, and then of course, I ended up joining a startup, which of course is like super demanding as well. And, but I wasn't scared of that because of just how I operate. But, when I talked with the person who interviewed me, who became my boss, I shared with him, I was like, I'm really working on developing balance in my life and like tried to make sure he supported that, which he did. But I, again, got in my own way because it was like, similar to what you're saying, like, I can do this. There's like so much that needs to be done. And like, I know we can make this awesome. And, but, so I did that to myself again in like only 6 months, like, so I'm curious, like, if there are any lessons you have about like finding that balance. Because like now I'm finally at that place where I'm like, okay, I realize I need balance and I'm trying, but like I'm failing miserably at like finding that balance and excellence.
Yeah, I totally hear you. First, I think that self-awareness is so important here. Like, you're learning this about myself. Again, my opening of this talk was, this is a talk about myself. This is what I'm learning about myself. And one of the things I said early on was, I have to be really picky about the hobbies that I pursue. Like, I'm interested in so many things. And I'm like during the pandemic, everybody was into sourdough. And I was like, I love bread. I want to learn how to make sourdough. And I was like, wait a minute. I know myself. Like, I'm into succulents right now. I cannot pick up another hobby and like feel like I can actually work, family, and succulent at the same time. Like, and so I think that's part of it, is that you have to have some self-awareness and then build those boundaries in for yourself. Like, Julie, I can take on 2 solid projects at the same time, or 2.5, or whatever the number is. Or at this stage of my life, I can only take on 1 major project. All others have to be deprioritized if I want to do a good job at this, and I don't want to get myself into a pickle where I'm pursuing 5 hobbies or 5 projects at the same time. And because of my obsessive nature, I can't stop. I like go after all of them with intensity. So I have to know myself, and I have to tell myself that I can only do one at a time. I can only intensify myself on a very few number of projects. And that comes with a little bit of self-awareness about what you can manage, your life stage, about what your personal priorities are. But I think you're doing the right thing. The fact that you can even articulate that to me means you're learning something about yourself, about where where you don't want to be and how you got there, and what you can do maybe going forward about being selective about those projects. Like, and I don't know if that's like something that you actually have a lot of control over now, but you can start that boundary conversation about like, I know myself, boss. I want to be able to do well on these things. I want to be able to limit my scope for now so that I can focus in on these things. Once they're done, I can pick up the next thing, or whatever that conversation is. Otherwise, 100%, you will get into the same situation that you just described, where you're like, oh, I could do that too, and that too, and that too, and that too. And that ends up becoming the 10 projects that you're obsessed in and you can't get out.
Mhm. Thank you.